Hi, UC Lions here and Glenn Guy's cohort in the Arcanum, and this is a short video about 5 images that I've reprocessed. They were originally submitted in Sphere 0, and I've reprocessed them for the Lazarus Rising Challenge of level 16. So image number 1 is this grungy looking HDR image. It's probably the least favorite of all the images I've submitted so far. I find the colors in the image distracting. This is a Japanese bathhouse with a hotel behind it. The colors definitely draw the eye away from the bathhouse in a negative way. The street lights here are also overexposed and blown out. You have some lens flare, purple lens flare going on here in the alleyway. The snow on the roof of the house and along this wall is dirty looking, should be much whiter. And the bathhouse itself is a little bit distorted. That's because the camera wasn't level when I took this image. It was taken in the middle of the night, about 15 degrees below zero, and my hands were almost numb, and I was kind of fumbling around a bit and in a hurry. So compositionally, I also cut off the apex of the roof here, which is not good. And I do like these steps. I think they lead the eye into the image, particularly these footprints here, although it looks a little grungy too and needs some sharpening. So here is the reprocessed image. I've converted it to black and white using Silver Effects Pro. The previous image was not about color, and the color was distracting, so it was a perfect candidate for a black and white conversion. I've increased the contrast in this image. I flipped it horizontally. The eyes tend to move from left to right, so having this image flipped makes more sense. The eyes kind of follow the steps up here to the bathhouse and to the hotel behind. I've increased the whites, trying to make the snow much whiter. I've used luminosity masking to decrease the highlights a little bit. I've also used luminosity masking to decrease the highlights on these two lamps here on the front door. The lens flare is obviously gone. I've used the dodge and burn tool and the content aware tool to remove the bright overexposed street lights in this alleyway here. I've increased the canvas size along the top of the image and used the content aware tool to add the apex of this rooftop back in again. I've also used the transform tool to straighten these vertical lines in the bathhouse and help with the distortion. I've also sharpened the footsteps here and the snow going up, and a little bit of sharpening going on in the wall. And also I used noiseware to do some noise reduction in the wall and the building behind the image. So overall I think it's a much better image than the previous one. Image number 2. This image lacks a little bit of depth and pop, and I also think it's a little bit too dark. So I've used Photoshop to blend a high pass filter in, which adds some depth and pop to the tetrapods here and the foreground, or all the rocks in the image for that matter, and this blurry water. And I've also used the Gaussian blur to brighten up the whole image. So here's the reprocessed image, as you can see. Whoops. As you can see, the rocks are much brighter. You can see the wet shine kind of coming off them, and the tetrapods, and also the water. It's not blown out, but it's a lot brighter compared to the previous version. Image number 3 is again an HDR image. This is an image taken in Kobe in the streets. It's a burger joint, and my friend standing in the center of the image. I've used different shutter speeds to get the motion blur to get the motion blur in the image, and also have some sense of movement and the stationary subject. So I've desaturated this image already, but you can still see that the eye is drawn to the Spider-Man behind my friend here. So I think that's because there's still a lot of red around this part of the image, causing the eye to be attracted to the only color that is in the image. I also think these lights are a little bit too bright, so I used some luminosity masking to bring down the lights. So here's the reprocessed image. I've removed desaturated it again and removed all the red color, so the eye is not so drawn away from the subject here. It's a very busy image, there's a lot going on, so I'm trying to get the eye to rest on my friend. His face and him looking at the camera here kind of centers the viewer's eye into the center of the image. Luminosity masking was used again to bring down the highlights in these lights, and as you can see too, I've also added a very strong vignette all the way around the border of the image to help draw the eye into the center. I've also increased the structure a little bit here in the foreground in this tabletop, and added some sharpening to it as well. Image number 4. This is an image of my friend and my brother skiing. The image is a little bit flat, and I think it lacks a little bit of saturation in the colors. You can also see here, you can also see here that in the snow and in the highlights, there's very little detail. It's not blown out, but I could do with a little bit more detail. So in order to do this, I created a black and white copy of this using Silver Effects Pro, and then I blended it back in behind the color image at about 10 to 15% opacity to create some depth to the image. It also helped give some contrast to the image. I've also reduced the brightness of this area of the image just to give it some separation from the skiers and the snow on this side. I've also used luminosity mask to reduce the brightness here of the highlights and increase the detail on the snow. Luminosity masking was also used to bring some more saturation into the color of the skier's clothes. So here's the reprocessed image, more detail in the snow, more saturated colors, a darker background compared to the foreground, and also in this image the white balance, it's a little bit too cold. The whole image is a little bit blue, so I've adjusted the white balance and warmed it up considerably. That looks more natural. There's the reason for the flat image is that it's an overcast, cloudy day with very soft light falling on everything, so it's hard to get any drama in the image. But the reprocessed one is a lot better. This is the final image. Some fireworks taken while sitting in the middle of a river. I think the left side of the image needs more contrast, and I've tried to add the contrast in this image by just using the burn tool. I have increased the blacks, but mostly it was just the burn tool used to darken these trees, darken the shoreline. Some noise reduction I did in the smoke here created by the fireworks. I've also, using layers in Photoshop, made some selections here of the reflected light from the fireworks and adjusted it so that the light is not spread out everywhere. It's more concentrated on the water here, and it kind of leads the eye in towards the bridge and to the fireworks, which are, I've taken down the highlights a little bit using luminosity masking again, and the brightness of the light shining through the smoke. So the previous image is quite bright. This one's a lot more moody, a lot more contrast. The trees are a lot darker. I think it's more balanced between the left and the right side of the image. And I've selectively change the light so that it's falling more narrowly on the water and it's darker on both sides. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you after the jump.